gun bang. Oh. Oh, hello.
So I saw Deadpool and Wolverine on its opening Thursday night, and here's a spoiler-free review. This is one of those movies where the nature of what it's about definitely makes you want to be sensitive to spoilers, and admittedly that's where a lot of the fun and intrigue for this film is. I know that's certainly how I felt going into it. So the only things I'll talk directly about is whatever was shown in those first two trailers. Anything else I'll allude to or not talk directly about. Stay tuned for the spoiler-free review for all the details. Now, there was so many reasons to be excited for this film. You know, on its own, this movie would have been a billion-dollar hit if the main hook was just Deadpool jumping into the Marvel Cinematic Universe and just being Deadpool. But the added level of fun, of course, is seeing him and Wolverine together. You know, some of the most memorable jokes in Deadpool 1 and 2 was when he was making fun of Wolverine. It's extra special because we rightfully thought we had saw the end of Hugh Jackman's iconic Wolverine after how Logan ended. But thank Galactus for multiverses and Ryan Reynolds being one persuasive son of a bitch. It probably took a lot of convincing to get Hugh Jackman out of his Wolverine retirement. I can only imagine what those conversations were like.
He's got a nice pair of smooth criminals down under.
But because of that, we get to see the ultimate odd couple in Deadpool and Wolverine team up in a movie. That first time we saw it doesn't count.
Wait, is that you? Your striker finally figured out how to shut you up.
I went into this movie not seeing any reviews or the Rotten Tomatoes score and stayed essentially spoiler-free. As I mentioned, I saw the movie on its opening Thursday night at my local AMC in Dolby. On a side note, I really wanted that intentionally nasty looking Wolverine popcorn bucket, but it was all sold out. By the time I went, all they had was the crazy looking zombie pool one. I hadn't seen it in any of the trailers, but I guess it was better than coming out empty-handed. The story here, and again, I'm only stating what was shown in those first two trailers. Deadpool's life has become stagnant as he's abandoned the superhero mercenary life. But once the TVA, Time Variance Authority, enters his life after his abuse of time travel at the end of Deadpool 2, Wade realizes that the only one that can save his world is Wolverine, who, if you can guess, isn't too keen on working with Deadpool. In the weeks leading up to this film, as I was doing my big X-Men and Fox Marvel movie marathon, I had some people I know tell me that they hadn't seen Logan. My reaction was... To which after that I said that you should definitely watch the movie. 1, because it's an amazing film. And 2, if you haven't seen that film, you won't fully understand why it's a big deal that we're getting to see Wolverine again, specifically Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. And after watching Deadpool and Wolverine, I think it's a necessity to have seen Logan because there's a lot of elements in this film that make it a direct sequel to Logan in some ways you definitely would not expect. Once it was confirmed that this film was going to be rated R and thereby not lose any of the special sauce that makes Deadpool Deadpool, you realize instantly that the MCU will never be the same due to the crazy nature of that character. I, and likely the entire audience, could think during the opening sequence was, holy shit, you know, this crazy action and violence is happening in a Disney Marvel movie. The first two Deadpool films had amazing opening credit sequences, probably the best of all time to be honest, but man did this one take the cake in just the outrageous fun, and to be honest, it might have been my favorite part of the film. It got me that hyped and it was that special and that awesome to watch. It was a weird song choice for this opening sequence, but man did somehow it fit the scene perfectly. The tone was really set from this point onwards, and it's definitely what a lot of people wanted to see in a Disney Deadpool MCU movie, and it's what was desperately needed. It's actually amazing that they were allowed to make as much fun as they did the current state of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There are a few direct quotes here that might as well have Deadpool say, yeah, post-Endgame things have really gone to shit around here. In fact, it almost makes you wonder that if the last few years of Marvel movies were made intentionally subpar in order for this movie to have some great material to work with. There's even another joke later on that alludes to trouble Marvel has had with getting a certain character's film off the ground and going. And everyone in the auditorium, even Deadpool himself, was reacting, wow, that's deep, that's ultra meta, and that's just too perfect. You're obviously going to have an entertaining time when it's Deadpool being Deadpool and the writing is up to snuff. And of course, the maximum effort that Ryan Reynolds puts into the character is just as great as ever. You throw Wolverine into the picture and you've got a really dynamic odd couple through this film. The nature of the multiverse plus the TVA allows us to see Wolverine in this story. It was special from the moment they announced that Wolverine was going to be in this film, because we never thought we would see Hugh Jackman as Wolverine again after Logan. His casting and what they did with that character through the initial X-Men films of the early 2000s was a big part in what led to the modern era of peak comic book films once the MCU got going, and he's just as good as ever here. It's a different Wolverine that we see here, but any Wolverine is mostly going to be Wolverine. And amazingly, after 24 years, we finally get to see him in proper comic book accurate attire. As the years go on, man, did that black leather in those first 3 X-Men films look like shit. The movie is true to its name, Deadpool and Wolverine. This isn't like Godzilla Kong the New Empire, where the titular heroes don't really team up to the final 20 minutes. Once the TVA enters the picture, it doesn't take very long for Deadpool and Wolverine to get teamed together. And given their personalities, they're of course going to clash in more than one way. They're together for about 70% of the film, and you get all the back and forth, non-chemistry chemistry, and the action you would want from these two. This action comes when they're teamed up or fighting together in all the bloody red fashion you would want. When they're fighting each other, given the healing powers of these two, it gives the filmmakers all the license to get as bloody and vicious with these two-bladed heroes as they can get. Now, their second fight really catches you off guard and manages to top their first showdown, despite it taking place in a pretty odd setting, but man was it an awesome scene. When it comes to purely the Deadpool and Wolverine part of the movie, this film absolutely delivers. Of course, there's more to the story than just that. You enter the TVA, the Time Variance Authority that we saw from Loki Season 1 and 2, and they really catalyze the plot here. Now, I don't think you'll be in great position to succeed in terms of completely understanding what's going on if you haven't seen Loki Season 1 or 2. There's a fair amount of concepts they say, like the void, pruning, or collapsing timeline like concepts, that are said quick and you're expected to know what's going on. As someone that's watched both seasons of Loki, there were some things occurring or explained timeline-wise once the movie was getting to its third act that made me feel like I was watching Loki Season 2, to where I just thought, okay, I don't know what the is going on here. Not to mention, I really didn't like the main TVA guy that we followed here. I know it's a Deadpool movie, but he was just played a little too goofy. I liked him at first, but as the movie went on, it just got on my nerves more and more and more. And I think it would have been a lot better if somehow we would have gotten to see Owen Wilson's Mobius, the main TVA agent we saw from Loki Season 1 and 2. Because this guy, as I mentioned, started off okay, but as the movie went on, I'm like, alright, this guy just isn't really cutting it, even though he did have some legit funny moments. Deadpool and Wolverine's journey together eventually brings them to the film's main designated antagonist, named Cassandra Nova. A character that I knew nothing about. She resembles the Ancient One from Doctor Strange, but she's the twin sister of Professor Xavier from another universe. She's got an interesting, albeit not fully explained power set. It's kind of a weird combination of telepathy and telekinesis. When we actually see her use her powers, it's pretty nasty when she gets her hands dirty, as she calls it. But she shows from the first scene that we see her that she can wreck your pretty easily and disturbingly, and that was the best thing about her. Everything else about this character kind of sucked. She has a scene with Wolverine later in the film that was great, but towards the end of the film, it felt like the movie didn't even know what to do with her. It seemed like the character was heading towards an interesting moral change, but this ended up going nowhere, and ultimately so did the character. In large part, I think the two opposing forces for Deadpool here, which is Cassandra Nova and the TVA, kinda sucked. Besides though the fun of having Deadpool and Wolverine together, most of the fun here in this film is going to be its multiverse type shenanigans. The nature of being a film about Deadpool and Wolverine, it was always going to play into the legacy of the previous X-Men films. But this film has fun with the legacy of all 20th Century Fox Marvel, which extends to a few other Marvel sub-franchises outside the X-Men. It's interesting because a lot of what was shown here is stuff, characters, or movies that most people couldn't have gave two shits about a year after their films were done. But if the last few years have taught us anything, is that it's always a cool dynamic to see something come back after a long period of time. And we're talking at least 17 to 19 years from most of the stuff I'm talking about here in this film. They were amazing crowd-pleasing moments, No Way Home and Endgame style, of course done with Deadpool flair and humor. I had gotten really f***ing mad that some of the promotional material, whether it was photo images or even a trailer revealed in the last few weeks, ruined some of the prizes because of heads on YouTube with their YouTube thumbnails or Instagram ruined it for me without warning. But even if you had, unfortunately like me, caught a glimpse of some of this stuff, this movie still has a ton of worthwhile fun surprises in it. One of them I admittedly predicted because it was just too good an opportunity to pass up, especially with its connection to the MCU in a way. But there's a few other major surprises here that I wouldn't have guessed if you had given me 50 guesses to predict what was going to be in this film. The movie makes effective use of its multiverse cameo type element. I was, though, disappointed by the treatment of Deadpool's collection of friends from the previous films. What you saw from them from the first reveal trailer for this film is essentially what you get from them from the whole movie. And with the way the story played out here, there just was not going to be room for a lot of them in this story. But as much as they were a big part of the first two Deadpools, those actors were probably thinking, go f*** yourself to whoever wrote the script for this one. Even the moments where the film wasn't always 100% working for me story-wise, it always stayed true to being a Deadpool movie. Meaning those moments where it's just so crazy, so meta, violent, and so Deadpool that you can't help but have a fun time as it's going along. If anything, you'll have a fun time just based on the actual Deadpool and Wolverine dynamic, which is what the film mainly needed to do anyway. For my final score, I've kind of gone back and forth on giving it a 7.5 out of 10 and an 8 out of 10. I think I'll go 8 out of 10 just because it's such obviously a memorable movie experience and it is doing something different which Marvel movies currently desperately needed. Now I know that score may seem lowish. That does it! But based on my rating system, a 7 out of 10 is a legit, solid, good movie. And obviously 8 out of 10 is a really good movie. I'd had as much fun as anyone could have with this film with those moments that are going to be iconic for years. But there were major elements like the villain and a lot of the TVA stuff towards the end that I found to be very unsatisfactory. The sooner you see the film, the better though, because it's one of those films that if you go into it spoiler free, it'll have that greater an impact. It's an event film on the level of Avengers Endgame and No Way Home, which makes for an incredibly fun, memorable viewing experience, especially on opening night. There's all the talk about Deadpool being the MCU savior, and you can definitely feel that with the excitement, hype, and everything that's gone into this film. A film like this is definitely what the doctor ordered after the ups and mostly downs post-Endgame. Like I said, there's a lot of dialogue on this film that really nails down the current state of the MCU in hilarious Deadpool fashion. But we now live in a world where Deadpool is not only a part of the MCU, but the Disney family in general. And seeing him at Disneyland a day after watching this film had me going, wow, this shit is actually happening.
Hi there.
But for the love of Galactus, parents, do not bring your kids to see this movie. I know it's a weird dynamic because it's Disney, it's the family-friendly Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's characters wearing bright costumes and now they're at Disneyland. But this is a movie that fully earns its R rating in its violence and language, and God bless it for it. Just keep your kids away from it until they're older, or bring them to Disneyland to see the family-friendly versions.
All right, come on, let's go. We don't got time. Hey, this isn't for me, Wolverine. This is for the children. And for all the people posting this live on TikTok.
Fine. I'm doing this for you, kid.
Without fully spoiling it, this film has easily the most unique mid-credit sequence out of any MCU film. It's definitely a nice tribute to something that the movie is going over, albeit it does feel a little out of place given the tone of the movie, but it will get some moments from audiences that watch it. There is a scene after the credits, and it's the kind of thing you would expect from a Deadpool movie. So that'll do it for this review of Deadpool and Wolverine. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching.
Let's fucking go!
Let's fucking go.